Major news here on this Tuesday afternoon, Steve. Nebraska has made some hires on the defensive side of the ball. Promoted secondaries coach John Butler up to defensive coordinator. Hired Phil Snow as associate head coach, and hired former Kansas City Chiefs assistant defensive line coach Terry Bradden to lead their own defensive line, replacing Terrence Knighton. Obviously, starting with the guy at the top, John Butler. Nebraska had an opportunity here to potentially look outside of the program, evaluated options, and ultimately decided to go with the internal promotion. Probably should have seen the writing on the wall coming when Butler was hired. And discussed, even in the offseason leading up to his hire, that he was pursuing a defensive coordinator role, and wanted that position, pretty badly. Now gets that opportunity again, for the first time in over a decade at this point. Last time he was a defensive coordinator was with Penn State. Obviously before Nebraska, he was the secondaries coach up in Buffalo. I guess, Steve, where are you at with this? I think putting all three of these hires together, I can see a path to this working out, but solely looking at the defensive coordinator hire, you could have seen Nebraska go a couple of different directions. Where do you feel? How do you feel about, I guess, Butler as defense coordinator?
Yeah, it's not the sexy hire, it's not the splash hire, but Rule said that he wasn't going to go that route last week when he was talking to us about it. He said that he was not going to, he wasn't interested in making a splash hire. And John Butler certainly is not a splash hire. But what I like about this and what I think Matt Rule probably likes most about this is the continuity factor. The coaches, the players know John Butler. The DBs know John Butler. Everybody in the program knows John Butler. So I think that is something that's a positive when you're thinking about a change like this. That's such an important role, the DC, to have somebody who's already been in the program, who understands Matt Rule and his coaching style, and understands, Rob Dvorak is along for the ride here still too as the linebackers coach. So I just think that it's such a plus to have somebody already in the building to take over this role. And I understand that a lot of people in the fan base probably are going to be underwhelmed by this, which is, totally fine. I totally understand that. But there's not much that you can say about John Butler in regards to football, that, he just knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He knows defense. And of course, it's a different game going from college to the NFL, but this game is becoming more and more like the NFL, anyway. So I just think that, it's not the sexy hire, it's not the splashy hire, but Rule wasn't really interested in doing that. And so I know some people are going to be upset by this, and that's fine, but let's give him a chance. Let's give John Butler a chance to see what he can do. He was a defensive coordinator in the Big 12, in the Big 10 before, at Penn State under Bill O'Brien, who he's going to be playing against or coaching against in the Pinstripe Bowl later this month. So yeah, huge day in Nebraska, football land. I personally I like the hire just because I'd like to see what he can do with this. He's obviously wanted to be a DC. That's why he left Buffalo in the first place in the NFL, was to kind of just reset and maybe come back to a spot where he could potentially be the DC. And yeah, it all lined up. And yeah, like you said, Tim, the writing was on the wall when he first came here, last July. He was clearly looking for a future DC role somewhere, and it as it turns out, Nebraska.
For sure. And yeah, I'll say this too, going back to Rule at Temple and Baylor and Carolina, across his tenure, across his career as a head coach, he's always had a sound defense, and that's largely because of the people involved, the scheme he runs. He's a defensive line guy himself.
Mm-hmm.
And you have Phil Snow now as associate head coach, a guy that's, kind of on the back end of his career, kind of likely, this is probably the last stop for him before he settles down and retires. And having Snow in after being a consultant all year, officially adding him to the staff, I think it's going to be just oversight and a good resource for Butler to lean on when he's game planning, to lean on as he tries to build out his defense in his vision. I don't expect a whole lot of changes from Nebraska. I fully expect them to live out of nickel in the back end. And I fully expect, some variation of a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5 up front. We saw Nebraska go back and forth this year. I expect more of that moving forward. And I think they're going to adapt to the Big Ten. I think Rule kind of saw where the Big Ten's going, what's needed to be done when he talked about playing quarters coverage and trying to live out of quarters. I think what you're going to see schematically is I think you're going to see a defense that is dictated by the back end, not the front end. Under Tony White, the front kind of dictated the defense, blitzes and pressures and those kind of things. I think moving forward, you're going to see Nebraska build out the defense based on disguising coverages in the background, playing sound in coverage, but also getting pressure up front. That's not going to go away. They're going to play with sound run defense as well. I just think this is going to be a top-down defensive approach than a bottom-up defensive approach moving forward. And that's typically how it is when you have, a secondaries guy leading the defense. So I'm excited to see kind of how this builds out. But Steve, kind of John Butler was a candidate for this job. We knew that. Phil Snow was also a candidate for this job.
Mhm.
Those two aren't necessarily surprises. Both of those guys have familiarity with Matt Rule. Both of them are here. The defensive line coach hire, Terry Bradden, that's a role where it feels like Nebraska is trying to one, he's got a very good resume. What he's done with the Chiefs over the past few years as the assistant defensive line coach, helped oversee the development of Chris Jones. He's been there with the Chiefs since Chris Jones' third year in the NFL. Kind of helped him develop and been a resource for him. He's directly credited with the development of George Karlaftis, who's currently in his third year in the NFL. The Chiefs' defensive front has been pretty disruptive over the last few years. Obviously, has two back-to-back Super Bowl titles to his name. A guy that doesn't have the recruiting experience you might be looking for, but he's got the lived experience. He's got the coaching experience, and as we saw with Pot Roast, that can work sometimes. That works on the trail, especially when Matt Rule, a defensive line guy himself, is the head coach at the top of this.
Yeah, pot roast. Terrence Knighton, he was the assistant D line coach with Carolina. He came over and took the defensive line room for Rule and Nebraska in 2023 and did really well with it. Obviously, he turned into a pretty dang good recruiter himself. So there's a path for Terry Bradden to kind of follow what Terrence Knighton did here. So yeah, I mean this is another out of the blue hire, I guess. Not a lot of people probably had any idea who Terry Bradden was before today in the Husker football kind of realm, but here we are. So this is just another young assistant coach, and we know that Rule likes the youthfulness and the full of it. Those guys are always full of energy. They're usually good recruiters, and just being in the Kansas City Chiefs program for the past 8 years. I mean, he's been there for a long time, Tim. So he obviously knows what good football looks like, feels like, tastes like, all that good stuff, and he can probably coach too. So yeah, I mean, this is just the start of a lot of research about this guy and a lot of just kind of figuring out who this is and what this staff is shaping up to be. But he's not the only new one. I guess the big ones, John Butler, Phil Snow, Terry Bradden, we know about, but then adding on to it Monday, I think it was, Tim, when Phil Simpson announced that he was officially returning to Nebraska, and he will be the outside linebackers coach. So the recruiting chops that he brings is going to help out the program. And he's another young coach who kind of grinded his way through the high school football ranks in Florida before jumping into the college coaching industry. So yeah, I mean, the staff is sure coming together here quickly with like a full month's worth of practices, bull practices, and bull prep coming up. So yeah, I like what you said, Tim, about the things not really changing drastically for Nebraska defensively with John Butler as DC because Phil Snow is coming in, and I know he's a very, very trusted source for Matt Rule. Matt always talks about how good Matt Snow has been to him and how good his defenses have been. I totally agree with you. Yeah, if it doesn't look like a 3-3-5, it's going to look like a 4-2-5. There's going to be 5 DBs out there. There's going to be 3 true defensive linemen. There's going to be 1 kind of tweener outside linebacker, defensive lineman, and then two inside linebackers. So it's going to be the same. It's going to look really similar is what I'm trying to say for when you're thinking about a John Butler DC.
Yeah, and on top of all of this, I mean, this hire, making this now, gives Nebraska some ammo here as they attack this transfer portal cycle as well. Had a vacancy at the defensive coordinator spot, had a vacancy at the defensive line spot. Now, you can kind of go in the transfer portal as you're getting guys on campus here in these next couple of days. You can point to, okay, well, John Butler's running the show. Phil Snow's here. He's done this, this, this. Terry Bradden's here. He's done this, this, this. It gives Nebraska some juice, and gives them an opportunity now to start, lining up visits, getting guys in town, kind of getting that all started away. If maybe Nebraska had more time, do they go a different direction? Potentially, but that's not this is where we're at. And again, like I said, I don't think this caught Rule off guard. I think he moved as quickly as he did for a reason. And also, I want to add this.
Should add
The
Keona
last,
Davis. I mean, it's
yeah.
just with Keona Davis. I mean, once you go in the portal, you can always have the option to come back if that program allows it. And now that Nebraska has a D line coach, you know,
Oh
the
yeah. Again,
story's
Terry
not over
Bradden's
with Keona Davis and other guys in the portal too.
for sure. Bradden's most important recruiting, I mean, first big
Yeah,
recruiting win could just be
yeah.
getting Davis back out from the portal.
Hmm.
So we'll see what happens there. I do want to note, mid-season or so, post Phil Simpson's initial departure, and with Evan Cooper leaving the staff and where Nebraska felt to be trending, it felt like they were dialing back efforts in Florida. Now Phil Simpson's back on the staff. Now Cortez
Hmm.
Mills is on the roster.
Hmm.
Jabari Barney just broke some freshman records and has guys in South Florida looking at Nebraska. Willis McGahee is playing significant snaps. Vincent Shavers is playing significant snaps. Larry Tarver and Amari Sanders figure to be contributors in the back end of the secondary. And then you add a new defensive line coach who hails from Florida. And then you add Philip
Hmm.
Simpson back to the staff. I fully expect moving forward Nebraska to be a presence in Florida once again. I fully expect that Flowbraska movement to keep moving, and honestly turn up a little bit, compared to previous years. So I'm really intrigued to see how that all shapes up. You're going to be battling against Terrence Knighton and Tony White down in Florida. You're going to be battling against a Billy Napier program at Florida. You're going to be battling against Mario Cristobal, and you're going to be battling against Scott Frost. So, Florida's going to be, at the forefront of our minds in terms of recruiting for the foreseeable future, I think. But no, more than anything, I'm really excited to see how this group comes together, and what they do. And again, it's not the flashiest hire. I don't think it's the flashiest group of hires, but they're
Hmm.
sound coordinators. They're sound coaches, and we'll just have to see, how this all plays out. At the end of the day, it is a bit of a gamble on Butler. Kind of it's been over a decade. And we saw at times this year the secondary struggled. I don't put that on him at all. I think this is the
Hmm.
personnel he was given, maybe not the personnel he wanted. Again, he showed up, right before the season, had only fall camp to really work with the guys, had a couple of veterans he was working with that he had to keep out there. But I know he's intrigued by the young talent he has, and they're going to be working to bring some veteran DBs through the transfer portal as well, guys that can contribute at a high level, specifically in the back end. Steve, before we get out of here, kind of any final thoughts or any lasting thoughts here for you on this group of hires?
Yeah, this hire kind of, I was thinking about this with Rule, and he's entering his third season at Nebraska, and usually everybody talks about the third-year jump with Rule and his programs, and he's entering his third in Lincoln. I think he's kind of shifting away from how he's done things in the past, where maybe he's taking a step away and he's from like the offense, the defense, the special teams, and letting his guys coach and being hands off. Maybe he was too hands on with some things his first two seasons here. Maybe he's realizing that he's understanding that in today's college football landscape, college coaches can't be the X's and O's guys. They can't be the hands on at practice guys. And he can still do it, but it's just going to create so much more on your plate. So I think Matt Rule entering his third year at Nebraska, he's realizing, hey, this has become more than ever a CEO type thing, a CEO position for a head coach. You need to worry about NIL. You need to worry about recruiting next year's roster. You need to worry about recruiting your current roster and having them come back so they can play with you again. There is so much that head coaches need to do right now that don't involve football. And I think that we are seeing kind of like a transition from Rule of being hands-on and in the weeds with everything in his program. And he still will be. But when it comes to like the game day operation, the practices, let the OC do his job. Let the DC do his job. Let the special teams coordinator do his job. I think maybe that's what we're seeing. And this hire with John Butler and Phil, bringing Phil Snow back in to help him out. Uh, uh, I mean, no disrespect, a no name in Terry Bradden to bring Phil Simpson back. He's getting guys, and I think putting trust in them to just do it and coach those guys up and recruit. So that's just where I'm at right now. I think we're kind of seeing a different
What?
Matt Rule
Yeah.
as he enters his third year.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does it say to you? Obviously, Dana Holgerson, a guy with former head
Oh yeah,
coaching
him too.
experience,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
basically completely overseeing his side of the ball. And then you have a guy in John Butler who has coordinator experience and position coach experience overseeing his side of the ball, paired with Phil Snow, who has coordinator experience. And then you've got Rob Dvoracek, who's credited for his efforts, behind the scenes and is considered,
Mm-hmm.
a rising star in the industry. Nebraska's going to have to make a secondary coach hire. Is that another internal promotion? Do they go outside and hire a flashy recruiter? We'll see what happens there. That's now an opening that I'm interested to see how it gets filled. And then you hire an established guy in DeKel Short. So there's a lot of guys on this coaching staff now with previous coordinator experience, and guys that can be the adult in the room, so to speak. When Rule is off recruiting, there's 5, 6 guys that can lead practice now.
Yeah. What one thought that's going through my head, Tim. When Tony White was here, there started to be this narrative floating around of too many cooks in the kitchen, too many guys with a lot of ideas. I mean, Dan Holgerson flat out said it. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on the offensive side of the ball. And he told the media that in a press conference, and more success started being seen once all those ideas were kind of limited down, and he only put the plays that he liked on his call sheet, and those were the only plays that were going to be called. He's go back and listen to the press conference. I mean, he said all that. Um, so when you promote John Butler, Tim, and then you bring in somebody like Phil Snow, who's been Rule's DC in his previous 3 spots, Temple, Baylor, and then Carolina in the NFL, is this more cooks in the kitchen, or like how do you see that dynamic with longtime Rule assistant Phil Snow and short kind of only one season under Rule with John Butler? How do you see that working together?
I mean, I think it's Phil Snow was a consultant on the defense this year.
Yep.
We do know that John Butler had a say in the back end of the defense this year. Tony
Mm-hmm.
White had a say. I don't think Rule does this if he doesn't think those two specifically can gel together. I think he can recognize that Snow and Butler maybe got along better, maybe having a better idea for or long-term vision for the defense, and can kind of pair their concepts together. And yeah, I mean, but you're right. We'll have to just kind of wait and see because
Yeah,
that's
a lot
that's
of this
something.
is wait and see, especially with Butler. Like a
Right,
lot of it is like he might be good, he might be bad. We don't know right now, but look at his resume. I think it's like I'm pretty optimistic about it. I don't know about
right,
you.
right. And that's the thing. It's like, again, it's wait and see. But at the end of the day, the results so far have been promising. What Butler's done in his career so far has been promising. And I think if you're worried about too many cooks on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's Snow and Butler's unit, because the
Mm-hmm.
guys underneath them are young. The guys
Yeah.
underneath them are young and don't have coordinator experience. Same thing on the offensive side of the ball. It's Dana's unit. All those guys fall in line under Dana Holgerson. And I think that's just going to be how it is. I think we're going to see Nebraska. Um, you know, I, the secondary coach is the one where, like, I think they end up going splashy young recruiter, because I think you need to find another young recruiter to kind of round out the staff. So I'm interested to see what they end up doing there. I want to note something real quick too. When we're talking recruiting and we're talking development, um, hiring John Butler and then John Butler pointing to his resume and
Yeah,
being
with
like,
all
"Here are the
those
guys I've
faces.
developed."
Mm-hmm.
That has worked already. We've seen that work for Nebraska already. Bryson
Yeah.
Weber committed to Nebraska shortly after Butler was hired,
Mm-hmm.
because despite Evan Cooper's departure, a guy that Evan Cooper convinced Weber to move to the defensive side of the ball and to play cornerback. And despite that tight relationship, Butler was able to just point to his resume and say, "Hey, I've developed these guys. I can develop you too."
It's
Um,
so powerful. That's such a powerful graphic. I mean, I urge all the Husker fans listening to us right now to go find John Butler's Twitter account and just go through his tweets and scroll until you see it. He lists all these NFL DBs that have seen a lot of success in the league, and he's the one who helped develop them to reach that status. I mean, it's such a cool graphic, and it's such like a powerful, like if I'm Bryson Weber, I'm like, hell yeah, sign me up for that. Let's go. Let's get coached by this guy. I
right.
think that's going to be just crucial on the recruiting trail in high school and the portal.
For sure. And then when they hired CJ, when they landed CJ Brono, the 2026 DB,
Yeah.
CJ's father grew up a Bills fan, and it meant a lot to him to be like, hey, this is the guy that coached Micah Hyde and Jordan
Yeah.
Poyer and
Hmm.
Tre'Davious White and this defense that I really liked, and so there was immediately that trust that was built. And now when you look ahead to the 2026 class and the 2027 class, and you see who Nebraska's looking at on the defensive line. Hunter Higgins out of May South in Kansas, Titan Davis out of St. Louis. These guys that have watched and are watching the Kansas City Chiefs, these guys that are in the area, that have seen what Chris Jones has done for the last couple of years. Maybe even look up to Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. Now they
Hmm.
have the opportunity to be coached by the guy that helped develop those guys in Lincoln. So again, I think some of this is intentional. I think some of this is conscious, and it's a unique strategy as we kind of balance and as we see the shift of, college football kind of turning to the NFL, hire guys with NFL experience that know how to manage these rosters and manage these personalities. Now, when money is involved, when all of this NIL is involved, when you're running your program kind of like an NFL program, hire guys with experience that know how to run those type of programs, but are also young enough and passionate enough and fiery enough to get on the recruiting trail and help recruit for you. Again, it's wait and see, but the
Hmm.
formula and I think the process to get here is pretty sound.
And again, the continuity factor I think is just huge with this. I think that was really important for Matt Rule and thinking about this whole thing is what hire would make the players most comfortable and what would it be best for the players and the defense. So I think that's really important. But one more from me, Tim, and we'll get out of here. I I'm thinking like way down the road here, so maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'll do it anyway. Rob Dvorak. How about like Rob Dvorak and who he's learned under? As a rising star in a coaching industry, as a young guy coaching linebackers at Nebraska. He's coached under Phil Snow, and now he's going to be coaching under John Butler, who has 10 years of NFL coaching experience too. That's got to be so good for somebody like Rob Dvorak, who's continuing to develop as a coach himself. And who knows, whenever Nebraska is looking for another defensive coordinator, you have a guy right there who's been learning and doing this thing in that program for a while. I mean, it's hard to say what the future holds, but Rob Dvorak, I don't know. I like this for him too. This is a good move for Rob Dvorak too. Even though he wasn't the DC that was picked, but he still gets to learn from these two dudes who have been everywhere around college football and know their stuff. That's got to be so good for him.
No doubt. I'm sure we'll have more thoughts on all of this as the dust kind of settles, as we look into these guys. They'll have some quotes as well. I'm sure in the next couple of weeks. So I'm sure we'll learn more and more about this process and about these new coaches. And more than anything, we're going to get an opportunity to see Butler's unit in action here at the
Mhm.
end of the month when Nebraska takes on Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl. But that'll probably do it for us here at Inside Nebraska. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned at InsideNebraska.com. The recruiting impact of this. I'm sure we'll have a story up on that. We're going to have some content up on a lot of that's happening right now. Transfer portal cycles ever moving. I just put up a list of targets that Nebraska is confirmed in pursuit of, as well as some other names to know. That list is only going to keep growing here the next few days. Visits kick off basically tomorrow. So a lot happening right now. Stay tuned in, and we will catch y'all next time.